What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of The Nation here on a Monday afternoon, heading into the early evening here on the West Coast. I am the Outlaw John Rocha. Welcome. It's a Monday. It's been a busy weekend. A lot was going on this weekend. A lot of movie watching, a lot of football watching, a lot of people watching going on in the world of, at least in my world, and a lot of madness going on outside of my world as well, things that I can't control. So I don't know how you all feel on this Monday, but that's certainly how I feel. It's like, when does this all stop? When can we stop the spinning of the globe for a second so we can all catch up for a moment, check in with each other, get on the same page, and move forward? You wonder, when's that going to happen here in our world, because it certainly is getting pretty tough out there. But we do have some great news, which I'm going to get to here today on this episode of The Nation, talking about the new WGA AMPTP tentative deal. Tentative deal right now is what it's being called, because, of course, they've still got to vote on it, still got to have the conversations about it, still got to work out the minutia of the language a little bit more and see if they can sell it to the writers, and if they approve it, what goes on, what will happen from that point forward, and what goes on now with SAG AFTRA. Are we taking a day to kind of relax a little bit from the negotiations, because it was a 5-day marathon negotiation, or are we diving right back in to kind of get it done and over with? You know, sometimes in the workout, it's good to take a break, and sometimes in the workout, it's good to just keep pushing forward just to finish it. So I don't know where we're at right now. I don't know where Carol Lombardini and the AMPTP is right now in terms of feeling what they need to do to tackle the SAG AFTRA situation and get our people a good deal. As I am a SAG member, get our people a good deal so that we can feel comfortable about it all going forward. So we will see what happens to that. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. We'll also dive into the big drama around the Martin Scorsese article in GQ. A lot to talk about in that article, an extensive article, very long article and a great interview there with Martin Scorsese. You know, 81 years old, kind of looking back on his life in a majority of that article, but also tossing out some points of view, some opinions, some perspectives on it all. And really, honestly, when you get to be 81, you're in the DGAF stage of your life. Don't give a fuck and just want to do your own thing. And so I absolutely respect that. And there's a lot in that article we'll touch on and talk about for sure. But certainly we'll talk about some of his quotes, which I can already see a certain somebody named Peter is losing his shit in the chat about it. All already assuming the way we're all going to go with this. So relax, Peter. We'll talk about it. Relax. And we'll get into all of that as well. Also talk about some of the reviews of the stuff that I saw this weekend, including the Continental. No One Will Hear You. I think that's what it's called. And also, what else was out this week? Oh, so a couple of, Dumb Money as well that came out this weekend. So we'll talk about that. We'll get into some trailers. I got a chance to watch some of these awesome trailers this weekend, and the Doctor Who trailer specifically, which I thought was really cool. And the Onimusha trailer. I don't know if you guys saw the Onimusha trailer. It has 1 million views already on YouTube. It's for a new Netflix series based on the video game, but the character is playing Toshiro Mifune, or the voiceover is the character, and the main character seems to be Toshiro Mifune from what I get from the trailer and from the voice acting going on as well. A little combo of Lone Wolf and Cub and stuff from the actual video game. I don't know if any of you play the video game as well. And of course, the Streamlabs and Superchats are open. So send in your questions, thoughts, and comments on this Monday afternoon. Let's have a little fun. Let's hang out with each other. And let's touch base with each other, and let's reconnect with each other. You know, sometimes I like to go toe-to-toe and battle on social media, but when we're here, we're all about connecting and having conversation, being positive, being supportive. I don't mind a little ball busting, a little old school on the playground going at each other on social media. But when we get here on the Outlaw Nation, I like it to be fun and playful, and occasionally some ball busting, occasionally maybe some conflict, some difference of opinions. But mostly it's about being supportive and positive. And speaking of which, Darren, so good to see you in the chat, brother, man. I've been getting the updates, and I'm very happy to hear what's happening, trending upward. And I'm very happy to see you hanging out with us here in the chat. Not trying to draw too much attention to you. I just wanted to give you a personal shout out, brother, because I love you and I'm happy to see you. So, all right, let's see. Wait till I get to your Streamlabs, says Peter. You mean your $1 Streamlab, Peter? Yeah, let me get to that big old Streamlab. We'll get to it in just a second. let's get into the WGA and AMPTP. And as Peter just pointed out, the Streamlabs Super Chats are open. It is right above my head right there. It's also pinned in the chat and in the description of this video if you want to send in your question, thoughts, and comments as we go along. But let's get into the WGA AMPTP situation here. The deal was signed. Well, the deal was agreed to last night there between the WGA and AMPTP. They've reached the end of the 146-day strike. Pretty extensive strike, the second longest strike that we've ever had. And of course, the first time that the writers and the SAG actors were on strike since 1960. So that tells you how long it's been since we had something where both sides of the equation, and the DGA already signed their deal, but two sides of the three-sided equation were on strike. So pretty impressive. And the writers, I mean, I've never seen a strike like this since I've been in LA, and I've been through 2 or 3 of these. And to see the effort and the desire and the motivation and the real understanding of the moment from the writers has been incredible here throughout. There was a negotiation committee. They tweeted out a positive response here as well. Let me bring that up because I want to give a shout out to my friend there, Kay Cannon. You can see her there wearing the black shirt there saying Writers Guild of America. But yes, everybody here, part of the negotiation committee here who signed the deals. I like the look of these people and the appearance of these people. And of course, their resumes are incredible overall. So very happy they were able to finally negotiate this. And you see the people behind them there on Zoom as well. So good stuff all around. I'm very proud of this team for holding firm, holding steady, holding fast, and putting the studios on notice about what needed to be done here. And they certainly got it done. And, I'm telling you, man, it's been incredible. I was out picketing once because I live in San Diego. So I drove up once to picket, and the energy and the crowd and the real motivation, the desire of people there was incredible to witness. And I think the studios eventually, kind of hit that wall where, look, we got to get this squared away. Enough is enough already. We had heard rumors over those 5 days of negotiations that the AMPTP came and they said, this is our final offer. This is it. But clearly that was another negotiating tactic, and the WGA pushed back and made some asks and some last minute asks as well that had to be kind of hammered out with the language and the legalese of all of that. And so finally a deal has been reached. Now it's not the end of the road in case people want to overreact a little bit. We've got to they are saying that they are suspending the striking for right now of the WGA writers, but they are also encouraging the WGA, and their captains are the writers who were picketing, to go and help and picket for SAG AFTRA until that deal is squared away. And they should, because certainly SAG people came out and picketed with WGA people before we ever voted on the SAG strike. So hopefully that is returned in kind. And I'm not bashing anybody who can't go. I mean, if it's days and days of doing it, maybe you want to break it because you got what you needed. But for those who can go forward and can go and strike with the SAG AFTRA, I think that'd be awesome to see as well. They're reporting that the nitty-gritty details of a language or on the use of generative AI in content production was one of the last items on the sides worked on before closing the pact. The WGA's negotiating committee wrote in an email to its members, we can say with great pride that this deal is exceptional with meaningful gains and protections for writers in every sector of the membership. This has to go through a contract approval and ratification process. And as I said, they sent a message out saying, to be clear, no one is to return to work until specifically authorized to by the guild. We are still on strike until then. Of course, the details of the contract are not going to be released. And even if they get leaked, it's not the final details because they have to hammer all this stuff out. They have to make sure everything passes muster in terms of the legal situation of it all. They have to make sure the AMPTP doesn't go back on some of their promises. And the other side has to also run it through their lawyers. And we have to get final approvals all around. Then it gtes pitched to the WGA membership, which I think they're trying to line up a vote by Tuesday. 11,000 members there in the WGA, who then they want to push it by Tuesday, hopefully. But yeah, this has been going on for 5 months now, since May 2nd. This is going to be interesting to see how people react to it, because we saw with the DGA deal, when that was signed, a number of directors came out on social media and were kind of denigrating the deal. and we're encouraging some directors not to vote for it. And we talked about on the hot mic a few weeks ago how that email scandal where some of these people in the WGA were trying to keep writer directors off their board because the writers were part of the strike, and so they didn't want to kind of mess things up with the studios or with the producers of the AMPTP by having striking people on their board. And so it was a whole drama. So clearly there's still some work to be done in hammering things out between the directors, the writers, and the actors in all of this once the dust is settled along with the AMPTP. So very interesting stuff to see as well. But yeah, I mean, I like this comment here from the negotiating committee. What we have won in this contract, most particularly everything we have gained since May 2nd, is due to the willingness of this membership to exercise its power to demonstrate its solidarity and to walk side by side to endure the pain and uncertainty of the past 146 days. SAG AFTRA also congratulated WGA with a statement that I tweeted earlier today. They congratulated WGA on reaching a tentative agreement with AMPTP after 146 days of incredible strength, resiliency, and solidarity on the picket lines. And the DGA shamelessly tweeted out congratulations to the Writers Guild on reaching a tentative agreement tonight on behalf of their members. We've been proud to support the writers in their fight for a fair deal. I don't recall the DJ asking people to go protest, but maybe I'm off on that. Maybe they did. I don't remember seeing anybody making a big deal out of that, but I guess they were supporting and look forward to reviewing the details of the agreement. Now it's time for the AMPTP to get back to the table with SAG AFTRA and address the needs of performers. Now, see, they're shameless here with that tweet because they're like, now you get over there and you negotiate as if they have been in the corner. Never mind that they, signed their deal way before WGA, way before SAG AFTRA. They could have held out and really put the pressure on the studios even more. But, directors, they like to get theirs and they got theirs. So we'll see how we feel about that going forward and how other writers and actors feel about that going forward as well. So we will see. But yeah, very good stuff here overall. I think it's a positive. Hopefully the end of the strike is coming. Hopefully, everyone's getting back. Everyone's going to get back to work on all sides of this, and the deals are fair. I'm sure there are going to be some people who have issues with the deal. There's always people who have issues with the deal, but hopefully overall, because of how hard they fought for this, that the deal works for everybody, or for a lot of people, for majority of people involved, and helps us everybody get back to work. And all our influencer friends can stop stressing out and wringing their hands and being worried about what to do, what not to do. They can go back to promoting movies, go back to reviewing or criticizing movies, rarely criticizing movies if they're influencers. And finally, they can stop all the whinging and the hand-wringing about all of this and get back and start doing their content on their channels. So that'll be good to see as well. All right. And what else? It's Stormy saying the DJ does have some goal. I agree with that. And I'm talking about influencers. I'm not talking about critics or people like my friends who have their YouTube channels. I'm talking about like some of these influencers who were just like scared about losing their money and made a whole deal out of it. So, I don't want to hassle. I don't want to, kind of give them any kind of credibility here. All right, let's hit this first Streamlab here from Peter, as he was saying. The fact that the takeaway from that beautiful profile of our greatest living filmmaker is him talking about how we should make less Marvel movies and more great films from great directors is insane, and we should all be embarrassed. No, Peter, that is a completely incorrect analysis of Martin Scorsese's article. He was not saying that we should all stop making Marvel movies. He never even mentioned Marvel in the article. And he never said we should all start making great movies. We are still making great movies. We're making as many great movies as we made before. If you do your research and you go take a look at all the incredible movies that have come out, we are making just as many great films as we did in the past. You may not like it. You may not believe it. But when you go and take a look at all the movies that have come out over the since 2008, since Iron Man and the MCU started, every year there's still a glut of phenomenal films. Now, the problem is that some of you all out there aren't going to see those films. Why are you blaming Marvel and DC and these companies who make the comic book movies, studios who make comic book movies, for your inability to watch those films, for your inability to force or promote or push your fellow person, film goer, to go see these great movies? And so there's a conversation to be had on that end. Did I tell you that West Side Story, a non-superhero film, made $10 million its opening weekend and didn't make much more than that overall its run in the box office? And that was an incredible film. So there are many incredible films that are out there every year. The fallacy and the fallacy of the logic about comic book movies is we all think they're overwhelming us when in fact we're getting what, 4 or 5 a year, which is way below the number for every genre of movies that comes out every year, because there are rights to be had with comic book movies that are different than regular movies. So, you can't just be making a Blue Beetle movie on your own without approval from DC, without approval from the rights. So you can't do those kinds of things. So naturally, they have to become big studio pictures because there's a lot of money involved in buying the rights for these characters and using these characters. You can't make a Superman film on your own without getting it all approved, or Batman film, but you can make a Western. You can make 10 Westerns in a month. You can absolutely, because you don't have to get any of that approved rights-wise from anybody. You can fabricate a Western out of thin air. There are plenty. I just saw 3 great movies this weekend that had nothing to do. Well, should I say 3? Yeah, I guess 3 great movies this weekend. Or the last few days. I enjoyed A Haunting in Venice. I enjoyed Dumb Money, and I enjoyed No One Will Save You, which I saw on Hulu, which I thought was fantastic. Those are fantastic films. Yes, I know the Agatha Christie film Haunting in Venice is based on source material, but not a superhero source material. So there are plenty of great movies that are out there for you all to enjoy. The problem that where I think people get lost in the nuance of it all is that, people think, oh, it's all these comic book movies all the time. Well, I hate to break it to you. The public wants those comic book movies. The other part of the fallacy of this narrative, and we've moved on to this conversation now, into the Scorsese conversation. So here we go. Shout out to all the WGA SAG AFTRA people. Here we go. We'll see what happens. And the AMPTP for finally figuring this out. So I'm very happy to see that. I just want to wrap that up and say that I'm very happy that is finally happening. And we'll see what the details are as this comes out. But into the Scorsese thing, comic book movies, we're not getting 15 to 20 comic book movies a year. We're not doing the numbers that the old Westerns or mafia movies used to do way back when in the 1930s and shit. We're getting 5 to 6 to 7 maybe, and less, maybe 3 to 7 comic book movies a year. Yet people want to pretend like the sky is falling because they go to their multiplex and there's 7 screens of comic book movies, and then there's 4 or 5 screens for other movies. Now, I understand that. That's a frustration. As a person who co-hosts a show called The Cinephiles, where we break down a great movie every week, I get it. I love films. I love old films. I hate people. Well, I don't want to say hate them personally. I hate the idea of some people who say that they don't go back and watch old movies or go watch black and white movies because they're dated or they get nothing from them. I find that to be phenomenally ignorant. And I think you have to go back and watch those old movies so you understand what motivated these great filmmakers that you love, like Martin Scorsese. How many of you have seen The Red Shoes? How many of you have seen those movies that are in the article, the GQ article that Martin Scorsese cites, or the posters that are on his wall? If you haven't seen those movies, then, and you're out here banging the drum saying we need to make great movies and start making comic book movies, what are you talking about? From what foundation are you talking about? So I'm always confused by that. That's why I love TCM. That's why I loved AMC before it became AMC of what it became when it was first originated. It was Movie Classics. I think Movie Classics are great. You can get the TCM app, and there are plenty of free movies on the TCM app for you to watch. There are plenty of free movies on YouTube. Sign up for $10 a month on YouTube. You can watch so many great films. I'm in the middle of the rewatching The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance again. There's great classic movies on YouTube. You can go online and you can find those websites that post those post movies, and you can find the old classic movies to watch as well. So there's a lot going on where you can make the effort to learn more about films, but we also can't resist that society progresses. And it seems like a lot of people don't want to go back and watch these old movies at the numbers they did before. And that's where I think people are really upset. People are mad that we're not getting these great films. We are getting great films, but you're mad that they're not the main films the studios are promoting and putting out there and getting behind and all this kind of stuff. And the truth is, they're not going to waste marketing money on movies that people are not going to go see anyway, And that's the thing at the end of the day. Studios have to be frugal about how they use their money, how they use their resources, and what they put marketing budget behind. And if it's not going to be a movie that they see making money in their polls and their surveys that they do are telling them people aren't going to go see these movies, then guess what? They're not going to go see those movies, and they're not going to waste money trying to promote them and put them. They're going to put them out there, but they're not going to promote them at the level they promote the comic book movies because there's a potential for more money. And where do you think the studios get the money to fund these great films, these independent great films? Well, not independent, obviously, but the studio films that they do that are supposedly great films, they get them from the box office money or partly from the box office success of those comic book movies. So I just don't understand people's inability to accept two things at once. Comic book movies are essential and important in what's going on in our world today, and people like these comic book movies. The comic book movies do have a commentary about what's going on in our world today. They do have powerful messages about working together, getting over differences, figuring out how to defeat main villains, conversations about overpopulation, conversations about relationships, conversations about betrayal. All of that dances through comic book movies. Conversations about, avenging. What's the right way to avenge the death of your family? What's the right way to ingratiate yourself as an alien to a new planet? There's so much about these comic book movies that speak about things that are going on in our world today. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they're all The Godfather. I'm not telling you that. But I also think the way people denigrate these movies, I think, is absolutely ridiculous and short-sighted and foolish. There's a lot in there. And look, you can argue about Phase 4. A lot of people are mad about Phase 4 and Phase 5 of Marvel, even though I've liked the majority of them. I don't think I've hated any of the Marvel movies. Even Captain Marvel, which I last year or 2 years ago did a rewatch of with the Lady Outlaw, and we were doing our stereo series. I actually enjoyed the film. I like Iron Man too. I don't hate it, right? I don't hate it. And the problem is people are either hate the movie or like the movie. And if I hate the movie, it's a symbol of the decline of Western civilization. We're never going to get movies, great movies. What about Parasite? What about 1917? What about Oppenheimer? What about Barbie? What about No One Will Save You? What about all these films? I bet I could go month by month. If I was to pull up Wikipedia right now, I bet I could go from January 2022 to now, and every month point out at least 2 to 5 to 7 films that some of you haven't seen that are rated really highly on Rotten Tomatoes or on these critics' websites or Metacritic or whatever it is, and you guys haven't seen them, or some of you haven't seen them. I don't mean to vilify anybody who's watching right now, but some of you haven't seen them. So if you're going to complain that we're not making great films anymore, or that less great films are being made, do the research and really find out. And then look in the mirror and ask yourself, how many of these films have I actually made an effort to go out to see? And did you go see the comic book movie? Then then who's the problem here? You know what I'm saying? So I'm just throwing it out. Yeah, Past Lives. That's another one that's out right now for sure. So anyway, I'm going to take a drink right now because I'm getting a thought. Yeah, you know what? Let's do it. Fuck it. I'm not going to go to January 22, but let's just focus on 2023. And then we'll hit the quotes here from Martin Scorsese. And we'll have a conversation about whether he was actually bashing them or not. Maybe he wasn't. Some of you were pointing out that he wasn't. But let's take a look here. Let me see if I can get it. Okay, so let's go. Megan, interesting film. Certainly a good horror film for sure. Yeah, I'm not going to talk about House Party. And we're starting with January, so we may not start as strongly for sure. Look, The Son was not a great film, but it was an interesting film exploring what happens when a son has mental health issues and how his parents respond to that and how having a fractured home can affect the mental health of a child and what have you. So I thought that was really interesting as well. You people, Jonah Hill was trying to make a commentary, so who's the writers on this? Yeah, Jonah Hill and Jonah Hill wrote the screenplay and Kenya Barris directed this, but they were trying to make a commentary about interracial relationships and racism within the construct of a comedy. Did it work? I didn't think it worked. I didn't think it was that funny, but certainly the approach that was there as an independent approach with something that was happening here overall. Let's see here. What else have we got? Let's look at February. Knock at the Cabin. I thought that was a damn enjoyable movie there from M. Night Shyamalan. 80 for Brady. A lot of old people really enjoyed 80 for Brady as kind of a break from everything else that was going on here. for sure. So we see that there are all look at how many non-comic book movies are out every month. There is one that has come out in the first 2 months. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. That's it, right? That's the only one that came out in the first 2 months. I mean, I guess Detective Night Independence. I don't know what that is. Maybe looks like a terrible old school Bruce Willis film for sure. Then we get to March. What do we have? Creed 3, which is part of a franchise for sure. But look, Operation Fortune, a new Guy Ritchie film. Children of the Corn, a remake of an old school horror film for sure. But look at Scream 6, part of the franchise for sure. But 65 is a new attempt at something sci-fi wise. Champions, an interesting film about Woody Harrelson teaching these kids about playing basketball. And I think they are mentally handicapped children, that he teaches them to play basketball and what that can mean for them. Then we have Shazam! Fury of the Gods, but then we have Boston Strangler, which is a new interpretation of what happened in the real world. Then you have John Wick Chapter 4. But look at all these films in between these big franchise movies. There are all these other films that are out there for people to sample and take a chance on and see if they're any good. Moving into April, Super Mario Brothers, great. But Air was a nice independent, it was a fantastic independent film for sure. And look at all these films that we got. How to Blow Up a Pipeline. How many of you saw that? That's a very interesting film. Then we get Renfield, which is an approach to take a new take on Dracula. Beau is Afraid. Less said about that, probably the better there. But look at all Evil Dead Rise. Then we have a franchise. It's a prequel thing. But then you get Guy Ritchie's The Covenant, which is an independent new film. Ghosted, which was on Apple TV. I think that's that terrible one that was at Apple TV. But look at all these films that are here. Are There God? It's Me, Margaret. They got a lot of great reviews from a lot of people. Sisu was a fantastic foreign revenge film that a lot of people love. Going into May, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So yeah, and then Fast X. But look at all these other things. Little Mermaid's on here as well. But then look at all these things in between that are attempts to do something new and different, or attempts to do non-comic book movies. Do you know what I'm saying? So there's so much that is going on in our cinema today that has nothing to do with comic book movies, but people just have to lose their minds about comic book movies and have to say, like, these films, these franchise films, they're destroying cinema. If the public didn't go in the large numbers that they did, the studio wouldn't make them. We're a supply and demand society. If those things weren't breaking box office records and making money hand over fist, people would not, studios would not keep making them. So your argument is with the people. It is not with the studios. It is not with the filmmakers or the writers or the actors or the producers or the directors. Your argument is with your fellow American citizen or your fellow global citizen who is going to see these movies and enjoying themselves in large numbers. Now, are they going recently as to some of these movies at higher numbers than they had before? No, certainly Love and Thunder, although it did make $700 million, wasn't that well received. Multiverse of Madness, there's a section of us who hate that movie, but it made almost $1 billion. I think Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 made $800 million. So if your argument is, oh, these things are getting in the way, studios don't want to make, yes, the studios don't want to make these other movies at the same numbers that they did before, with the budgets that they did before. Sorry, let me say that correctly. The studios don't want to make these movies at the same budgets that they did before because they don't see the return. And like any business, it's the same thing. You don't see the return, So this is what we have to kind of figure out and put in motion, or put in context with all of this. Sure. Calvin is correct. If people didn't buy cocaine, I don't know if he sells it, but people wouldn't sell it. It's absolutely the truth, right? See, now here's Peter again. Yeah, but the ones they release are shit lately. That's your opinion, Peter. And they've made hundreds of millions of dollars. The reason Oppenheimer is an anomaly is because those films don't make hundreds of millions of dollars like they used to in the old days. I don't mean they made hundreds, but comparable. They made a lot of $1 million. You know why? Because there's a new generation. New generations of moviegoers have different tastes. Do you know how many people were complaining who were of the older generation in the 1970s about the 1970s movies? A lot of these people in their 50s and 60s and 70s were complaining about the 1970s movies because they showed sex, they were too violent, they were against America, they were showing people of color having relationships with white people. There were so many people who were angry about the 1970s movies. They were dirty. These people didn't look like they showered. There was all kinds of stuff that was going on of anger from the people who were of older generation in the 1970s. Nixon coined them the silent majority. And they, at the time when all these films are coming out in the 1970s that are so incredible, from the late 60s into the middle of the 1970s, we have Republican presidents. While we have these groundbreaking liberal question systems films like The French Connection, and Justice for All, Taxi Driver, these films that are questioning all the things about our society and make us afraid of our society, we still have a Republican president. Why? Because the unsilent majority, which is the older generation, which is the religious members of our society, weren't necessarily liking these movies, even though they're groundbreaking. And a lot of people like me consider the 70s the greatest decade of filmmaking ever. So it's a generational thing, and it's a cyclical thing. And it kind of shocks me to hear Scorsese say the things. And look, I love and respect Scorsese to pieces. Some of his greatest films have been the soundtracks of my life growing up, and certainly there are a lot of films that I go back to of his that I thoroughly enjoy and then discover all over. Like I've been discovering Goodfellas all over again, even though I hate those final 20 minutes because of what happens to Henry Hill in that movie. Going back and watching him now is fantastic. We're finishing up our conversation on The Wolf of Wall Street, which is 10 years old, ladies and gentlemen. Let that sink in. And some people on the internet were trying to tell me that, well, Nolan hasn't done a comic book movie in a decade. It's been a decade since Wolf of Wall Street. So should I say that Wolf of Wall Street was a long time ago, as some people said on Twitter? Should I say that Wolf of Wall Street shouldn't even be considered part of Scorsese's resume because it was 10 years ago? This is the kind of stupidity that I have a hard time navigating when people respond to this stuff, because I just go, how are you not making these connective how are you not making these connections when you're making these comments? It drives me batty. It drives me insane, for sure. All right. Yeah, exactly, Adam. 10 years isn't old, but I had someone on Twitter. I should bring up some of these Twitter responses from people before they delete them, where they were trying to tell me, well, Nolan hasn't done a comic book movie in a decade. That was a long time ago. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? It's literally 10, 12 years ago is not long ago, for God's sakes. It's just mind-blowing to me. The kind of pretzel logic is what I call pretzel logic. Like they twist themselves into a pretzel to try to make sense of their conclusion. These people that find the answer but don't do the work, right? They can't explain to you how they got to the answer, but they want credit for the answer. That's the same kind of mentality, I think, that operates when people say things like that are utterly ridiculous. Let's see here. What is this Kurosawa? Yeah, from Twitter. He had the worship and support of the. Yeah, exactly. Yes, he did. And so does Scorsese, who is now at the same age of Kurosawa. All these younger filmmakers love what Scorsese is doing and are supporting Scorsese. Absolutely. But do you know the truth about that tweet? The studios didn't want to fund Akira Kurosawa's movies when he was in his 80s. They didn't want to give him the money. Martin Scorsese and Lucas and Spielberg had to give their own money or raise the money for Akira Kurosawa's movies. So again, it is cyclical. Exactly what I'm saying. Do your research. Study the history of film, and you will find that you have a completely different perspective on all this kind of stuff. And here's the truth about life, and some of you have a really hard time grasping this. Life is progress. Life is change. Life is evolution. You may not like what we evolve to. You may not like what we progress to, but you're not going to do a goddamn thing to stop it, because that's how it works. The reason the SAG AFTRA and WGA guilds are fighting with the studios about the AI situation, because they know it's impending and there's nothing they can do to stop AI. Nothing. But they can limit it within the scope of their work, how it's affected, how it's used, how the studios try to put it in motion. They can try to limit how it's done, but there is no stopping AI. There will be all AI generated shows coming. There are already all AI generated videos. And I don't mean those weird Hobbit and Wes Anderson type movie. I mean, like legitimately all AI videos on the internet that are kind of shocking. Kind of shocking. You know, a friend told me that he was able to use AI to have Liam Neeson introduce our show. And he played me the AI for it, and I lost my ever-loving mind. It sounded so believable. So these are these things you have to understand. All right. Well, anyway, we're at 30 minutes. Let's take a quick break, and then we'll jump into the Scorsese quotes. Yes, Peter, you can calm down now. Let's see. Do I have any more? Oh, no more Streamlabs or Super Chats. Okay. I guess we're just enjoying the discussion. If you want to send in Streamlabs Super Chats, feel free as we go along. Would appreciate it. The address right above my head. It's also in the description of the video, and it's pinned in the chat if you want to send in your support. But I'm going to take a quick break, take a drink, and we'll jump into Scorsese's quotes and break those things down. Do I have a thing? Yeah, right after this. All right. Let's bring it up here. Let me take a look here. Oh, Josh says I suck at this. Oh, sorry, Josh. Sorry, Josh. Well, you can go someplace else. Feel free, Josh. No one's stopping you. No one is stopping you. What's going on with this now? Hold on. Let me see if I have to increase the light. Yeah, Josh, get out of here. No one needs you here, buddy boy. If you don't like what's going on, brother, no one is stopping you. Please click away. Take you and your 5 followers and click away. All right, let's see. Let's bring it up. John, now Tony's. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that, Tony. But let's bring it up here. Those are jealous people, and you get them all the time because they haven't done anything with their lives, so they just want to criticize other people who do things with their lives. All right, let's bring this up. I'm going to make myself smaller so you guys can see. Oh, no, actually, you know what? I'm going to make myself bigger. Yeah, and then I'll make this bigger here so that you all can see it. Let me see. How do I do that? I don't have the pad. So, okay. Does that work? No, where is it? I know it's here. Okay, here we go. Is this it? Yeah. All right. So let me make it even closer because it's clear that it's clear. So it's clear for you guys to read it as well because I want to make sure that that is good for you all. So one more zoom in will be good. Yeah, there we go. All right. Okay. So let's read these. Just this section. Just this section is all I'm going to read. Just this section. So yeah, that's what she said. All right, let's just section here. All right. So he says, what do you think changed with, oh, by the way, I should give love to, well, you know what? I'll give love afterwards after we're done reading this. But what do you think changed with the industry that a filmmaker as talented and dedicated as you just can't make the films that they want? So he's asking the question, what is it that changed in the industry that you can't make the films that you want? Because the article itself is a fantastic article that's an interview with Scorsese talking about his life, his career, the ups and downs, where he's at now as a filmmaker and where he wants to go and what he wants to still make and the tough times he's had over the last few years making the films that he's made and having to go through the things that he's had to go through in order to make those films. So that was a big deal here. So he's asked about this, about what do you think changed with the industry that a filmmaker as talented and dedicated as you just can't make the films that they want? And Scorsese said, well, the industry is over. In other words, the industry that I was part of, we're talking almost 50 years ago. It's like saying to somebody in 1970 who made silent films, what do you think's happened, right? But he has his theories. Studios, he said, are, quote, not interested in any longer in supporting individual voices that express their personal feelings or their personal thoughts and personal ideas and feelings on a big budget. And what's happened now is that they've pigeonholed it to what they call indies. Well, the reason the studios, it's not that the studios don't want to make these kinds of movies. It's that the studios have read the tea leaves, have seen the box office returns on these films that they've spent a lot of money on that were people with personal thoughts, personal ideas, and personal feelings on a big budget and saw them crash and burn at the box office. So studios realize that they can't spend the same kind of money on these kinds of films at the numbers that they spent them on back in the old days being like the 1980s and 90s and what have you, and a little bit in the 70s. So they've made a course correction because you know what? And this is really hard for some people to get, especially those of you who are really caught up in the creator, creators. The studios are a business, a fucking business. They are not here to make movies to hold your hand, stroke your hair, and tap you on your tummy. They are here to make movies to make money. When those films were being made back in the 80s, 90s, 70s, and a little bit into the 2000s, like Gone Girl, things like that, they were being made because the studio saw the possibility of making money off of them. Do those executives and those studios, are you going to tell me that those executives back then somehow have nobility when they were pulling some of the most nefarious shit, when they were having casting couches, when they were doing all kinds of Me Too situations in their own private offices, for God's sakes? This is the kind of thing you cannot think in a vacuum. You must expand out. Everything is connected. Everything has tentacles. You must understand that that's how the world works. So the studios nowadays, they see where the money is, and the money is in these big blockbusters, big franchises, right? And they take a chance to put a lot of money into these films because they hope there's a big return, right? And look, you can look at Oppenheimer and say, look, see, people do have an interest in that. Possibly. Because I bet if you did an Einstein biopic, how many people would really go see that? How many people would it really make $900 million? Oppenheimer took advantage of a moment in time in pop culture with Barbie as well, and them slamming in together Barbenheimer, that elevated the status of the film. And then people really liked the film and went back to see it over and over again because there wasn't much else at the box office that was considered at that level. So people went over and over again to see the movie. It's also the best performing film from Christopher Nolan in quite a long time. All right. So that should tell you something about the film as well. It says Scorsese is often cast as a retrograde right because of all work of the Film Foundation, all this. And he's asked about movie theaters. He believes that movie theaters are not dying precisely. Quote, I think there will always be theatrical because people want to experience this thing together. And he's right. Absolutely. You all know, sitting in the theater laughing with strangers as you watch a movie, just like people in a bar watching a football game who don't know each other, but they're cheering for the same team. They have a communal experience here. That's what it's all about, communal experiences. YouTube is a communal experience. When you're doing a watch-along of a show, like The Real Rejects do sometimes and Late to the Party do sometimes, when you do these watch-alongs, it's a communal situation, right? When people come to hang out with me lately for these after Ahsoka episode instant reactions, that's a communal thing. We're all coming together at this show on my channel to have a fun conversation about everything we got in that episode, the communal nature of it all. But at the same time, the theaters have to step up to make them places where people will want to go and enjoy themselves or want to go and see something that moves them. I think that's an excellent point. How many of you have been to a movie theater and the seats are shitty, the cushions are going bad, the popcorn is stale or cold, the hot dog is terrible, the buns are burnt, or they come out like real crispy, so they're not good, the pretzels are soggy? How many have gone to that and then gone into the theater and the sound is not great? There's a tear in the screen. These are these things that you have to worry about. And I see this now. The LA theaters versus the San Diego theaters, holy God, man, that is a night and day situation. There are only a couple or 3 or 4 really good high-end theaters that I go to that I enjoy, like the Westfield UTC. That is a good theater in San Diego. But the Regal Theater in San Diego, a majority of those actual theaters, the seats, they're terrible. The steel digs into your sides, and it just isn't an overall pleasurable experience. The AMC Mission Valley, the 20, I go down there to see screenings, and only when I'm in the IMAX theater do I really get to relax and enjoy a movie because they have the leather, you can stretch out, and it's great to see movies like that. To me, every single theater should be like that. No theater should be allowed to exist that doesn't have that, unless it's a $1 movie theater or $5 movie theater, because then you understand what you're getting. But if you're going to pay almost $20 for a fucking ticket, and sometimes more if you go to IMAX, like $30, you should get a high-end experience when you go into the theater. Not shitty seats, not uncomfortable seats that are broken, You know, those are those things that you have to look at here. And I think Scorsese's right. You know, people are like, why aren't they going to the theaters in the great numbers? Because these theaters are shitty. Fix the fucking theaters. He suggested that the Scorsese, the movie theaters could show only the films that Hollywood actually made, and therein lies the problem, blah, blah, blah. And he says, I feel bad about having done this, since Scorsese's skeptical comments about Marvel and comic book films in the past had attracted a lot of vitriol. And here I am, inviting more vitriol from Martin Scorsese. Please complain to me and not him. Right, I agree. But he does see trouble in the glut of franchise and comic book entertainment that currently makes up much of what you can see in a theater. The danger, quote, the danger there is what it's doing to our culture, Scorsese said, because there are going to be generations now that think movies are only those. That's what movies are. So, again, I go back to something I said a few minutes ago. If you interviewed Billy Wilder in the 1970s, if you interviewed some of these filmmakers in the 1970s who are old John Ford, some of these filmmakers might look at these 1970s films and have the exact same quote that Scorsese's saying. The danger there is what it's doing to our culture. A lot of people felt those films glorified sex and violence and thumbing your nose at the systems, at the institutions of our country. And because there are going to be generations now that think movies are only those, that's what movies are. They found those movies sometimes gross, too sexual. NC-17, Midnight Cowboy, 1969 wins Best Picture. And there are sex scenes in that movie. The Graduate, you have a movie about a young guy having sex with his girlfriend's mother. You know, when you watch the movie, obviously in context, the movie makes sense and it's great. But if you're from a different generation, an older generation, you may be saying that these films glorify this shit, and therefore people are going to think that these are movies, not the 1950s movies, not the 1960s movies like The Apartment or Ben-Hur or The Ten Commandments or any of these great films from the 1940s and 50s, Citizen Kane, or any of these films that are from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. So we're in a generational shift, and I think that's what's getting lost here. Look, Marty's got every right to it, Marty, like I know it, but Mr. Scorsese has every right to have his opinion about these things. But I do think he is not being self-aware about how he is now the Billy Wilder of his time, or the John Ford of the time that it was when he was a young filmmaker, an experimental young filmmaker in the 60s and 70s. It's a different time, you know, and older people are always going to complain about the stuff that's coming out. I see some of you complaining about some of the stuff that's coming out, but it's all cyclical. It's all cyclical. And he says, I think people already think that. They already think that. And that's his argument, though. There is a kernel of understanding to it. Like, I see a kernel of truth in his argument that people are going to think that these movies are the only that's what movies are. It's true, but there's nothing you can do about that. Because if people aren't instinctively going to go and find these great classic movies, then they're not going to find them. You know, they're not going to want to go find them. Scorsese is trying to make studios do these films that are not going to make any money in sync studios. So would you rather have no money, no studios, and those films not being made anyway because there are no studios, or a system where there's at least one type of film that is making a lot of money, that is funding the studios and allowing them to fund these smaller indies, as he likes to call them, films that have something to say about our society? And by the way, independent film is much more accessible now than it ever was back in the 90s in its heyday of actually being in theaters. The fact that you can turn on Hulu right now and watch 500 independent movies, and 500 damn good independent movies, or Netflix or Max or any of these streaming services, Apple even with some of their new films, not all their new films, but some of their films, you can find these films and really get something fantastic out of them and enjoy the experience. We have made it possible to enjoy films in your house instead of paying $25 to go to a movie theater to have a shitty seat, shitty popcorn, a shitty experience. There's better situations for you to enjoy these movies. But that's conveniently left out of these conversations here between the writer and Scorsese. So, but I get it, because I agree that you know, these new film fans God, I'm going to say this. I'm probably going to get in trouble, but you know me. Sometimes when I see these YouTube channels and they go first time watching and it's a classic film, I kind of want to go and slam my head into a wall and go, well, then how do you think you could possibly review movies? See, I'm a big person, and this is a controversial opinion, and I get it, and I'll get in trouble for it. So what? It is what it is. You know, it's a Monday, you know. But I believe that you have to watch classic films to understand how to review movies and understand that these concepts that you think are new have been around for decades in old movies, but because you haven't watched them, they're new to you as a reviewer, and you think they're groundbreaking, when in fact they aren't. And that gets my goat sometimes when I see some of these reviewers, some of these critics or reviewers and pundits reviewing films and citing these things that are happening in a movie and saying that it's groundbreaking or incredible or it's never happened before, when it happened in the 1960s or 50s or 40s. People think the 1940s and there's a reason they came up with a Hays Code, is because movies were getting a little crazy. They were trying to limit the amount of groundbreaking and line-breaking concepts and ideas that films were doing back then, you know, and people think they're old, and there is so much to gain from going back and watching these old films. You know, I worked with somebody who said they would never watch black and white films, are stupid. And I'm like, yeah, I never need to hear your opinion on anything. Or I worked with somebody who said they don't go back and watch classic movies because they think they're dated. Yet that person thinks they should be taken seriously as a reviewer. And so it shows these things that you just kind of go, yeah, you know what? I don't agree with that mentality. Just my own point of view. I don't agree with that mentality. You know, I love classic films. I think it's important to be knowledgeable about classic films. So you can have a much more well-rounded perspective to throw out there and do your part in helping these films stay alive by citing them in your review, so that someone who follows you and respects your point of view goes and checks out that old movie. The old critics used to do that. The critics in the 1980s and like Leonard Maltin, who I love and respect, and his daughter and his wife Alice, like, they're great people. Jesse's so great. She's awesome. Those are the people that, like, when I used to grow up reading reviews, they would cite movies that were similar to or did concepts or tackled storylines that were in older movies. And so because they were so steeped in those things, I would go back and check out those old movies and watch those old movies to get perspective. But you rarely see reviewers doing that nowadays, especially on YouTube. You rarely see them reference certain films. I do my best to try to make sure I weave in some classic films in my conversations if they apply, because I think it's important. The reason I co-host the Cinephiles with Steve is so that we can keep alive the idea of older films and great classic films, so that people who come to discover me through the other stuff that I do maybe become a fan of the Cinephiles and give it a chance and listen to us break down a classic film. I can't even tell you how many times people have DM'd us, tweeted at us, Facebook messaged us, emailed us, Patreon messaged us, and said, I never wanted to see, I've never even heard of this film, or I never saw this film, or I was meant to see this film, but I watched it because you guys were going to talk about it. Or I watched it after you guys talked about it because you really got my interest in it. And so in a way, we're paying it forward. So I come from a unique place where I can actually talk about the fact that I do promote older films, classic films, great films, and also talk about the recent films and love comic book movies and uplift those as well. So I don't make a delineation, because we have to accept it, and well, not accept, but enjoy or find ways to enjoy these films. Doesn't mean I support bad films being made. It's just a matter of, like, I don't look at comic book films as a whole and go, they're destroying the industry. Fuck, they're the only reason the industry is still around. They're one of the big reasons the industry is not the only, I guess. They're one of the big reasons the industry is still around. And that's important. All right. So he's talking about this. I'll go back to these quotes here. Because there are going to be generations now that think movies are only those. That's what movies are. I think people already think that. They already think that, says Scorsese, which means that we have to then fight back stronger. And it's got to come from the grassroots level. It's got to come from the filmmakers themselves. And you'll have, you know, the Safdie brothers, and you'll have Chris Nolan, you know what I mean? And hit them from all sides, and don't give up, and let's see what you got. Go out there and do it. Go reinvent. Don't complain about it. But it's true, because we've got to save cinema. So there's a lot here in this, because citing Chris Nolan was the big deal because everyone was like, he directed 3 Batman movies and he's story credited for Man of Steel. So that's 4 comic book movies he was involved in. All right. Now, a lot of you were pushing back on when I don't know if any of you are watching or pushing back on me, but some people were pushing back on me on Twitter about this, and we're like, "Oh, Nolan, but Nolan, he's done other films. He's done these 4 other films since then." Yes, but what's Interstellar about? It's a guy breaking the laws of physics and time just so he can tell his daughter he loves her for 3 hours, right? That's what the film essentially is. It's kind of like a superhero movie in that he is able to break the laws of space and science and time in order to go back in time and be able to communicate to his daughter something. Yeah. Then we have the villain in Matt Damon, spoiler, when he has the twist and the turn, he's essentially a comic book villain in the things that he does. So there are comic book elements in Interstellar. There are connective tissues here, right? Dunkirk, that's a straight-laced film, profiling something that's very important to Nolan, very important to a lot of people from that generation, that battle. I found the film to be incredibly boring. I wasn't sure who to follow through most of it. Visually, it's great. But if you're trying to sell me Dunkirk visually great, then I can sell you Multiverse of Madness as visually great. And that's a 1-to-1. And that's a tie. So, all right, fine. Then we move on to what? Tenet, right? Isn't that right? Tenet. And Tenet is just an inaudible, garbled mess. And I know there's a lot of people who like to stroke or masturbate their brains going, I figured out Tenet in the first watch. You couldn't figure it. I figured it out. All of that. But if a majority of people go to see it and don't fucking get it and don't like what they're getting, can't hear what they're getting, can't understand it, why would you fuck with the audience to not enjoy your movie? It doesn't make any fucking sense. Zero. And there is an arrogance in going like, well, I challenged the audience. They couldn't figure it out. There's an arrogance in that. And certainly Nolan doesn't lack for hubris and ego. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's how you succeed sometimes in this world. But, if you're going to say to me like, oh, this film, blah, 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 but there's comic book elements of that. He literally creates a multiverse, an other dimension, an alternate reality, shall we say, for lack of a better term, where these things are happening in reverse and then they're crossing over at certain moments, right? So that has comic book elements to it. Now, Oppenheimer is just like Dunkirk, a straight-laced film, and I love Oppenheimer. To me, so far, best film of the year, #1, like by miles, #1. And I love it. And it's his best film he's done in a very long time. For me, overall. Maybe the best since Inception? Maybe. And that's saying something, But even Inception had this alternate dream state where you can go in and do multiple levels. Come on. That's something out of comic books, right? You can see the connective tissue there. Even The Prestige. Wait, you're telling me you could actually clone yourself? Come on. So he has had a proclivity to lean towards the more fantastical stuff in his movies. They are not straight-laced films like The Godfather. They are much more fantastical films. So you may not like this, but Nolan has comic book bones in him. And so his films have a little bit of that within them. And, are they hard stories and, overcoming things and relationships and tears and loss? And yes, of course. You're taking you on a journey. But there are a lot of comic book films that take you on these journeys. And people want to denigrate these films, but they take you on journeys. And just because you didn't feel anything doesn't mean people who came to see it didn't feel something when they were watching it. And so to me, this idea that he wants these filmmakers, like the Safdie brothers, I mean, come on, Uncut Gems, that is a fantastic film. I love the Safdie brothers. But you've got Adam Sandler in the lead playing this really hyped up character. He borders on the level of caricature at times with some of the madness that goes on in that film and the things that he's doing. So, these are these films that are being made at this time that appeal and have a sensibility about the madness of the world. And I appreciate that. But he essentially is asking these filmmakers to only do these kinds of films, to only make these kinds of films. And he said, you got to hit the studio from this side and this side and this side. Imagine if Billy Wilder, John Ford, William Wyler and all these other directors were coming out who were older directors in the 1970s saying, we got to save cinema from these heathens who are making sex films and violence films and interracial films and all these. We got to stop this because we got to make these wholesome films and really great classic films that have something big to say about the world like we did it. Do you know? I mean, imagine that, and I think that's where a little bit of loss of perspective. And then what if they were the ones saying, like, we got to save cinema from these heathens and the things they're making? No one wants to see a guy sleeping with his girlfriend's mother. That's ridiculous. Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice. I don't want to see a free sex and sexual revolution movies. Are you insane? Stop it right now. It's the same thing. This idea of saving cinema. Cinema is always going to be fine because there are enough people that gravitate to great films. The Oscars don't lack for choices every year. And there's a reason for that, because we're still making great fucking movies, man. And we're still getting mad about great movies that don't get nominated. So how can we be mad about movies that don't get nominated and complain with the other side of our mouths that there's not enough great films being made? What the fuck? All right, there we go. And then he says, cinema could be anything. Scorsese said, it didn't just have to be serious. Some like it hot. That was cinema. But I do think that the manufactured content isn't really saying cinema. That's what he's saying. Essentially implying streaming films are not cinema. He says, no, I don't want to say it, but what I mean is that it's manufactured content. It's almost like AI making a film. Oh, my God. And that doesn't mean that you don't have incredible directors and special effects, people doing beautiful artwork, but what does it mean? What are these films? What will it give you? Aside from a kind of consummation of something and then eliminating from your mind, your whole body, So what is it giving you? Right. I love that face. Very strong face. Again, I love Scorsese. And it goes on to say he's not a Luddite or a technophobe. He's excited. He is as excited about Avatar, The Way of Water, about 3D and IMAX and formal technological experimentation as anyone else. He said, I'm looking forward to new ways. It's just, I got as far as this, and that's what I do. That's it. And if I could just muster up the energy, God willing, to make a couple more, one more maybe, and that's it. Okay, that's as far as I got. You keep going until you can't. But what I mean is that you got to rip it out of your skull and your guts to find out what do you really feel you should be said? What do you really feel should be said at this point in life by you? You got to say something with a movie. Otherwise, what's the point of making it? You've got to be saying something, right? I think that's noble. Well, actually, we'll keep this up because I want to reference this back here. I think it's noble as hell what he's saying, because he's at the stage of his life now where every movie is precious. So for him, he's trying to put an 81-year-old mentality on these filmmakers that are in their 30s, 20s, and 40s. And that's not going to work. Young people experiment just like he did. Dare I say New York? They're experiment. King of Comedy, that did not do well in the box office when it came out. It has only been appreciated as the years have gone by. He hasn't always knocked it out of the park. I think Shutter Island is a piece of shit. I really hate that movie. I think Gangs of New York sucks after the first 10 minutes. As soon as Liam Neeson dies, the only good thing in that movie is Daniel Day-Lewis. The other storylines are ridiculous and nonsense, and the kid's not going to kill him. It's just nonsense. But the performance of Daniel Day-Lewis is great. Cameron Diaz is completely miscast, and DiCaprio seems like he's not sure what he's doing half the time in the movie. So, Scorsese's not always knocking it out of the park with his films. And so, in my opinion, and so this idea that he goes back to this idea of manufactured content and AI making a film. I understand, because there have been certainly complaints about people saying, certainly Dexter Fletcher came out recently when he was talking about Ghosted and saying, well, you have to make streaming films a certain way versus films for the studio, theatrical films. And I think that's understandable. And I get it's a different medium, so you have to approach it differently. Totally understand that. I think there's anything shameful about that. That's just how it goes. And so it's different. But for him to kind of shit on them when a lot of streaming films, like I just saw, like I said earlier, No One Will Save You. Some of these streaming films go straight to streaming, and they are incredible experiences for a person like me who loves cinema and loves film. They take advantage of the new mediums, or the new abilities, or the new ways of doing these things, the new avenues to put these films out. Prey was incredible. Yeah, a lot of people wanted to see Prey in the theater. I totally understand. I would have loved to see No One Will Save You in a theater as well. But to denigrate them because they're not coming out of theater, or they're, generated by AI. That to me is weird on so many levels, So I just wanted to make sure we hit that. So look, I understand where he's coming from, because he's an old man who's looking, and he says it and I don't mean old man negative way, by the way, because I'm no fucking spring chicken myself, but I understand that he's coming from a place where he wants to leave a legacy, and he wants the filmmakers. This is like a missive from him to the filmmakers out there to say to them, hey, fight for something more, fight for something different, fight for these old school films. But you can't do that and force people to like those movies. The public will organically tell you what the fuck they want. That has always been the truth of life. The truth of anything is that the public tells you what you want, what they want. The public tells you what they're willing to go spend money on. And the public tells you what they're going to spend their time watching and spend their time promoting or spend their time talking about at the water cooler on Monday morning. And so those are those things that you look at. So look, I absolutely respect Martin Scorsese as a filmmaker. As I said, he's made some of the greatest films that I've enjoyed talking about, breaking down, deconstructing. And I wonder how many people who were complaining about my point of view on this on Twitter were also out here not having seen a lot of those Scorsese films. I've seen a lot of those classic films. How many of them seen Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, or Mean Streets? These other films of his. I bet there's a lot of people who haven't seen Raging Bull. I bet there's a lot of people that haven't seen Taxi Driver who are out here trying to tell you Scorsese is right. So it's just an interesting situation. That's a lot of talking. Sorry, guys. But see here, this A Warlock 82 says, I'm not going to shit on you, brother. I'm just going to read your comment and have a response here. It says, I don't like black and white films, John. Sorry. I just don't watch them. Very old and outdated. I'm also not a movie reviewer. That's an archaic way of looking at this. Yes, your point of view is an archaic way of looking at it, in my opinion, honestly, because you're not a movie reviewer, so it's a different situation. I was only talking about movie reviewers, that I think you've got to see the classic films. Like I went through, back in the early 2000s, I went through the list of the AFI Top 100, and I checkmarked just about everything. I was like, what have I not seen? I've got to watch these things. And I would go to the TCM app, or not app, but the channel. And back then, what did I have back then? I had something back then where you could go like 2 weeks in advance. And so if any of those films were on that channel, I would immediately set them to record those films so I could watch them, so I could have more knowledge, because I love film. And so you say, I don't watch black and white films. Well, have you gone back to watch a lot of black and white films? Have you seen that? You say they're outdated, yet some of them have the greatest thriller, suspense, horror, drama, romance, comedy type stuff going on in those films. Now, I get outdated because I don't like to read Victorian literature. I'm not a fan of Jane Austen or any of these old, like I started to rebel against that in college. Like I didn't want to read any of these fucking books. I'm like, what the hell do rich white people crying about their problems have to do with what the fuck's going on in my life? I give a shit about that kind of stuff. Because usually they wrote about the aristocracy or the lords and ladies of the manor and all those books. And it just was never my cup of tea. So I get that approach to it. But film, old film, is teaching you techniques that people are still using today. Old film is showing you groundbreaking stuff that was groundbreaking then, because it was actually the first time they were doing it. Groundbreaking storylines. It's the first time they were doing it, So there's a lot to be mined in the old films if you're willing to open up. Well, Edgar Allan Poe that's not Victorian era. That's not the, Jane Austen shit or was Coleridge or these other authors. Poe is something else. Poe's like, old school Holmes. Poe's like a melancholy depressive. That's what Poe is. So it's a different situation. Let's see here. What do we got here? Oh, Michael Miles says, this just sounds like he doesn't want to compete with comic book movies. He would rather they don't exist, so the audience can only watch the upteen mob style movie from him again and again. Trust the audience. Yeah, Michael, that's a great comment. Trust the audience. I agree with that. I don't know if he doesn't want to compete comic book movies. I think at 81, like, what can he do? He's only got, like he said, he's only got a couple more left in him. So he says. But you know, Scorsese will probably pump out 10 before he passes on. I don't know, but certainly he does feel like, and some of these filmmakers, some of these older filmmakers, and some of the fans feel like this as well. They're like, oh, it's all comic book movies, it's all franchise movies. That's the ones that get the most air. I understand that, but it's because they make the most money. And don't cite me Oppenheimer, because Oppenheimer's an anomaly, not the rule. It's the exception. Nowadays, like Gone Girl, you know, Gone Girl would not make 100 and what did it make? 120 million, 130 million when it came out back in the old days. Jesus, I shouldn't say that. When it came out, what did it come out? 2014? 2014, Gone Girl came out. It made $370 million. Let that sink into your mind. Can you imagine if Gone Girl came out this year? Do you think it would make 370 million? Do you think it would even get into a theater? Probably not. It probably might go straight to streaming on Apple or Max or something like, or Netflix. Mank is a film that absolutely 10, 15, 20 years ago would have come out in a theater and would have been lauded and possibly, you know, may have won awards or whatever for it, even though it was nominated for some awards nowadays. But it's a possibility that could have done something incredible. But it went straight to Netflix, you know, because I think secretly these filmmakers and these studios understand that the public's taste is not there to go see these kinds of films at the level that I'm telling you, the studio made it very clear, the publicist made it very clear. No one expected Oppenheimer to do as well as it did. No one. Their internal tracking was so low. There's nothing. I mean, Nolan was certainly the selling point, but Nolan's films, if you look from like Inception on, Nolan's films have been, or from Interstellar on, Nolan's films have been progressively making less and less money. And so this idea that it would make $900 million is absolutely, and it might cross $1 billion was something that people hadn't thought of at all when it came to Nolan. So just crazy stuff. Haunted Mansion said, a sweet piece of irony. This discussion has inspired me to watch Joker again, a $1 billion comic book film. In my opinion, a great piece of cinema, heavily influenced by Scorsese's work, with an upcoming sequel, again inspired by Scorsese. Great stream, Rocha. Oh, thanks, Haunted. I appreciate that. And yeah, that's absolutely right. How many people, when they read the reviews for, and listen, this is honest truth. How many people, when they read the reviews for the Joker movie and saw people citing these Martin Scorsese films that influenced this film, like Mean Streets and certainly Taxi Driver, went back and discovered those films for the first time? And that's what I think the job of the reviewer is, to review the film, and if it connects to something that's an older classic film, to cite that classic film, because you never know who's going to go back and discover it. So just like Haunted Autumn is pointing out, talking about this Scorsese-inspired film, I'll go watch it. And I agree. And I know a lot of people, especially a lot of the, overinflated intelligentsia in this movie space, like to bash the Joker and claim that it's derivative and stolen and blah, 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 blah. But it's actually a phenomenal film. And I love it. And I still watch it. I still watch scenes from it. The direction, the construction, the approach to it, all of it is phenomenal to watch, you know? And so to me, I see these films and I see films like this that are able to, how can I say this? They're able to marry the two things, which is a classic an old school approach to classic cinema with a comic book movie subject. Right. And some of these people try to have it both ways. They try to be like, well, that's not really a comic book movie. It's fucking called The Joker. It's a fucking comic book movie. Whether you like it or not, it's a comic book movie. To me, when I hear people say stuff like that, like I saw someone tweet at me today. I got to take a break too. I saw someone tweet at me today and say like, well, he wasn't talking about those comic book movies. And immediately my cockles went up, for lack of a better term, because that to me is just like, well, you're not like them. You're not those kind of people. You're not like them. You're different from them. We like you. You're not one of them, right? That's essentially what people are trying to do when they say that about certain comic book movies. It's all in the fucking bowl. Okay? The Joker's in the same bowl with Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. They're all comic book movies. And comic book movies are the source, or comic books are the source for these movies. Okay? So don't sit there and try to separate them out. This is not those kind of, fuck out of here. When Harry Met Sally is in the same fucking bowl as Leap Year or any other romance comedy that isn't that great or is okay, it's in the same bowl, you know? The Godfather is in the same bowl with any shitty mobster movie you've ever seen. It is in the same bowl because it's a mobster movie, you know? Now, is it an elevated mobster movie, as people like to use that term? Sure, fine, yes. But it's still in the same fucking bowl. So I just get so weirded out when people try to make those kind of delineations to prove their points, which are so, to me, they have no basis in actual truth and foundation. To me, they're just convenient twists of logic in order to hit your point. So, oh yes, King of Comedy. That's right, Donna. Sorry. That was the other one I was thinking about, King of Comedy. Thank you for pointing that out. Donna saying the Joker has too many connections to Taxi Driver and King of Comedy. It doesn't for me. I like it. I like what the connections it has overall. And I think Todd does it his own way. Todd does it completely. Yes, it's inspired by, but it's completely its own thing. And there's no protagonist in any of the Scorsese films that matches what Joaquin Phoenix is doing in The Joker. There isn't. You know, as wacky as Scorsese or Pesci is in Goodfellas, he's not as terrifying as Joaquin is in that movie. There's an instability to what Joaquin is doing, and what happens to him at the end, right? Which rarely happens in any Scorsese film. The maniac protagonist actually wins. So, kind of crazy. What's Kai upset about? Everything that is woke. Oh, woke. Oh, Jesus, Kai. I'm sorry, Kai. Anybody uses woke gets banned. So bye. Take care, buddy boy. I don't have to waste time with nonsense of people pushing it. If you somebody tweet out, if you use woke in a sentence, you're not a serious person, and I think that's 100% true. All right, let's take a quick break, and I'm gonna move on to something else as well, and we'll move on to some reviews here as well. Sorry guys that took me a while. I didn't know he was crying, because I'm looking at the camera talking. So, unfortunately. All right, well, let's take a quick break and then we'll jump into some other stuff and hear from you all. And please send in your Streamlabs and Superchats. If you've got questions, you got thoughts, comments, points of view, send in your love here on the channel. And we'll be right back right after this. All right, let's see here. What else did I put on the rundown of stuff that I was going to talk about today? We hit the GQ stuff. We hit Scorsese, SAG AFTRA. Oh, the reviews. Yes, let's do a quick circle of reviews. All right, Dumb Money is out now in theaters. And I really liked Dumb Money. I know that Jeff wasn't the biggest fan, and my friend Lights Camera Jackson didn't like it at all, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I highly recommend it to you all. It's like The Big Short light. It's not quite as dense as The Big Short or as extensive in its scope, but I think it's a fantastic retelling of the GameStop situation that happened a couple of years ago or 3 years ago. And the performances across the board are fantastic. I mean, Paul Dano does a great job leading this one. Shailene Woodley is really good as his wife, who's dealing with the ups and downs of this whole situation. Seth Rogen is great as essentially the put upon antagonist, but not really strong enough to be the antagonist. D'Onofrio is fantastic. Great to see D'Onofrio in something like this. Nick Offerman is great as well, playing essentially the antagonist for a little bit and what happens with them. But then on the other side, you've got America Ferrera, Anthony Ramos. They're both fantastic in their separate roles, showing you, and the two young college girls that are in there, I don't remember the actresses' names, but they are all showing you the different people who got on board with this situation and what they were going through. And I saw some people pushing back against the movie saying, I don't care about what these people who made a lot of money off this. Like, what are you talking about? They were all poor that they're showcased in the movie. They were all poor or struggling or had debt, student loan debt in the hundreds of thousands. And they stumbled upon this thing on Reddit. They listened to this guy and they participated in it. And the film itself is essentially a rebel uprising against these people who are in power, who have the money. And when you see the things that happen in the movie, and they did actually happen in real life, you're actually incredibly shocked at how the levers of financial power can be turned on and off by people in positions of power, and how little our system is set up to punish those people so that they can keep fucking over people who are on the lower level of the strata, like a lot of us. I don't know if any rich people are watching me right now. I doubt. But like, this is the situation. Well, maybe some of you consider yourselves rich. I'm not going to judge. But like, this is the essential truth. And I like that the film is inspiring in that way, and shocking, and also enlightening. And they make it really easy to follow. Like, you can follow the financial stuff in the movie really well. It's not a negative. It's not difficult. So I enjoy that overall. What am I overall here? So I think it's fantastic, a film. And so I highly recommend you all go see it. There's nothing new I can tell you in terms of the story, because it's out there for people to read. But I think Craig Gillespie does a wonderful job. Gillespie, like I, Tonya, these other films that he's directed, he does a great job of telling these larger stories, but keeping them ground-based with people of lower social economic status, so that you can feel a connection to these people and have a universal feeling about what they're going through, and relating it back to your own life, and no matter where you're at. And I think that's a great thing. That's a great gift that Gillespie has as a director. And some of the techniques he uses in the film to show the Reddit stuff, to show the increasing of how the stock is rising, all of that is pretty inventive, and it makes the film fun to watch. And I'll tell you this, at my screening, and I went to a combined critics and fan screening, or moviegoer screening, and at the end, people were standing up and cheering. I'm not bullshitting you. They were standing up and cheering by the end because of the way Gillespie hits that punch at the end of the movie. And so I highly recommend it. Now, let's move on to No One Will Save You. As I've been saying already throughout, this is fantastic. It is essentially a film with one line in it. It is a 90-minute movie with Caitlin Dever as the star. She is this young woman in the town. She lives in her house. She's recently dealing with the loss of her mother, and she is hated by the town, and something comes to visit her, and it sparks insanity for the hour and 15 minutes of the movie. So it's an hour and a half movie. 15-20 minutes in is when the big event happens, and then it's just a fucking a car on fire flying down the mountain type of movie that is chilling and unsettling and horrifying, and a surprise ending that I think if you see it, you'll be talking about with anybody who sees it. So I highly recommend you all see it. Good, really good acting from Caitlin Dever. She's essentially the only person you really need to pay attention to in the movie. There are other actors in the movie, but like I said, they don't talk. So it is just all told in this way, and it maintains your attention. It really does. And it's a phenomenal piece of filmmaking. As Scorsese is over here telling you, like, we need new inventive voices, and blah, blah, blah. I will say, I hope he's seeing No One Will Save You. I hope he'll watch that film, because it has a lot of connections. It essentially it's not a silent film, but it has a lot of silent film influence for sure when you're watching it. So I highly recommend No One Will Save You. I'm not going to spoil what shows up, but when it shows up, the film pulls no punches in elevating the horror and the terror of it. And then where it goes, it one-ups itself in every situation, leading to that finale, leading to that ending. And some of you may love the ending, some of you may hate the ending, but that's what makes great filmmaking, is leading you to an ending that divides the film fans who are watching it. And so I highly, highly recommend it for you all. Haunting in Venice, I saw that as well. This is definitely the second best of the Brana films in terms of the Poirot stuff. The horror aspect here is really well done, considering this is an old story. I think some of the techniques Brana uses as a director in this movie are fantastic. He drops out the sound for for significant stretches of scenes that help it to take on even more horror vibe or terror vibe that I think really works. Look, you're not going to get away from the fact that this is a Agatha Christie mystery. So that's just baked into it. So if you go in with that understanding that some of the old school, slightly cheesy moments between these characters are going to happen because it's an Agatha Christie book, then I think you're going to enjoy it. I think Branagh is great in this movie. There's a lot of acting he does in this movie that it's the most acting he's done in all three of the films, which I enjoy. Michelle Yeoh is fantastic and unsettling in the movie as well. Kelly Riley is damn good because I'm not a fan of Kelly Riley on Yellowstone. I think that character is ridiculous and an utter caricature. And look, Costner too. Like a lot of the characters on that show are caricatures, which is why it makes it really hard for me to watch that show after the first season. It just became ridiculous with everyone trying to say cool lines and do cool things all the time. It just became, it lost its foundational piece of authenticity, and it became we're just a bunch of bangs, you know, except for poor Wes Bentley, who gets verbally and physically beat up by everybody on that show. But yeah, I mean, to me, this is Kelly Riley is damn good in the movie. The twists and turns here are really interesting as well. The only person who isn't good in the film is Tina Fey. I think she's horribly miscast in this role. She's a TV actress, man, and it shows. I mean, Baby Mama is fine, but that's not a really, you know, tough film. Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, she was not good in that. And there's a couple other, when they try to make her a lead in these kind of more serious films, she doesn't have it. Kristen Wiig has it for the most part. She doesn't have it. And when you see her in the movie, it's just like, oh man, she's doing like some version of the 1950s type of, hey, see here, man, I'm right. And you're just like, no, couldn't you have found an American or a British actress to do an American accent who had done a better job with that role? But that's the only negative about the film. But overall, I like the way it's staged. I like the pacing of the film. I like the mystery baked into it as well. And then the finale works really well and is pretty brutal and heartbreaking when you watch it. So just throwing it out there for you all. The one I didn't like is the Continental. Oh, man. I was so looking forward to this series. I'd seen the trailers. I was like, yeah, man, jump from the world of John Wick. Let's go. One of the Hughes brothers, who I, really enjoyed as directors, Dead Presidents, Menace to Society, and From Hell. I like From Hell. I know some people don't like From Hell. I like From Hell. And seeing one of the Hughes brothers directing this, I think it's Albert who was involved in this. I was very excited. And then I watched this hour and a half first episode, and I was like counting the minutes on my watch. It was insane, like how uninteresting, boring, and ridiculous the film is. And I know the John Wick series was, the John Wick films are ridiculous, of course, because he seems to always get away, and he's unexhaustible in all of these incredible fights, and seems to best all these people. But you've got great actors like Lawrence Fishburne and Ian McShane. Oh my God, I lost the other two actors that I was thinking about. Oh, Angelica Houston. You populate it with these Lance Reddick. You populate it with these fantastic actors. Is it Hiroyuki Sanada, who was in the last one? You just put like weight of these actors in, actors who know how to deliver depth and complexity and nuance. And unfortunately, the Continental, from the main guy down, Colin Woodall down, it's just not interesting. And they make like all these characters say cool lines and be cool. There's a difference between playing cool and emanating cool. Keanu, for his plotting, measured delivery of lines, it works in the construct of those films because Halle Berry as well, because all the other actors that are damn good bring nice levels and layers to their characters that flesh out the movie and make it much more interesting for the viewer. And Keanu's great, but like everybody else is doing a lot of the lifting as well, and I like that as a balance. But this show, I mean, the main guy does not radiate Winston Scott in any way, shape, or form. And it's just not, it's aloof, it's distant. It's not that interesting. And I was really surprised by it. The fight sequences seem mashed together as opposed to really cool and fun to watch and interesting. They try to make you invest in the two brothers here, but you're like, these guys are kind of idiots. And why do I care about these two? Because they're kind of idiots. So I was just really surprised at how much I did not like the Continental. And I definitely do not recommend it to you guys at all. Yeah, and that was rough. It's not a spinoff. It's a prequel, Sphinx. It's a prequel. It's Ian McShane's character. It's the beginnings of Ian McShane's character. Even Mel Gibson, and I saw some reviewers being upset that Mel Gibson was even in the show, whatever. In the first episode, which is an hour and a half, by the way, I think there's only 3 episodes. He's barely in it in the first episode. But when he is in it, you can tell my brother is slumming it in this project. I think it's one of the biggest tragedies of the Mel Gibson situation. Obviously, saying the things that he says is terrible. Doing the things that he did were terrible. So all that being said, it's a shame that this is a guy who blew his golden ticket to A-list movies by doing this shit. And now he's doing stuff like Daddy's Home or The Expendables 3 or something like that. And you're just like, come on, man. You're fucking Lethal Weapon, man. You're fucking, was it Man Without a Face? What Women Want? I mean, there were some really great performances from Mel Gibson in some interesting films. And, you know, now he's doing this schlocky stuff. And he does a lot of this schlocky stuff, sadly. And he gets paid, and there's a market for it. You know, Grillo, Bernthal, they all exist kind of in this stuff. Although Grillo and Bernthal will occasionally rise up and do some A-list movies, they also do these kind of smaller, hard-edge man type movies. But, you know, it's just sad to see that this is what happened with Gibson. And I say that because I enjoyed him as an actor. And I think he's a damn good director. But I just wish he hadn't lost his fucking mind and gotten drunk and said all the stupid shit that he said and put him in this position, because he is wasted in a show like this, just utterly wasted. So I do not recommend this movie at all, or this show rather at all. And I wish they had found nothing against Colin Woodall. I'm sure he's fine in other things that he's done, but he is so uninteresting in this role. And the actor who plays his brother looks like something out of a, you know, he acts like something out of one of those straight to DVD type films. And the direction here is really boring as well. It's not just the actors, it's the direction as well, where Hughes takes us, like some of those sets feel so fucking setty that you're just like, I can't even suspend my disbelief here. Some of the characters are just cliched characters, like the black brother and sister. There's shades of Jim Kelly because they run a karate thing, but they run a stress. Hey man, Vietnam, 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 all through this show. And there's a lot of unnecessary moments where misogyny happens. You're like, I get it. You're trying to make a point that it's hard for women in the 1970s in this world. I get it. But if you hang so many lanterns on it, eventually the fucking structure falls apart. You know, it just, from the weight of it all, it just feels unnecessary. There's nothing that shouldn't be in there. There's a way to do it that's organic, as opposed to like, do you get what I'm fucking saying? And there's a difference there in that. So, yeah, fair enough. Out of pocket drunk. I don't want to enable. That's absolutely your choice, Rick. Absolutely. I mean, I won't disregard you or, have an issue with that. All right, let's move on to some Streamlabs here that came through. Let me answer some of these here as we're close to wrapping up the show. Mike McKenzie says, with Spider-Man 2 coming to the PS5 very soon, are there any chances of having Geek Buddies episode with your boy Yuri and talk about his amazing work in these games? Yeah, I think there's a possibility we could have a fun conversation with Yuri for sure, Mike. I saw Yuri was being interviewed by my boy Patrick Beatty over there in Utah. I bet that was a good interview. Yuri's great. We've stayed in touch. I missed his birthday. Stupid me. He invited me to his birthday a few months ago, and I just had stuff come up and I couldn't get up there. But I'm overdue to take him out to dinner, and I'm overdue to have a conversation with him. So I will absolutely text him and have a conversation, and hopefully he'll agree to come on the channel or agree to come on Geek Buddies and have a fun conversation with us about the game. So yeah, definitely, Mike. I've been thinking about it for a while now. Jim Fan says, Scorsese reminds me of my grandpa. Sometimes he likes to talk, so I just listen. LOL. I mean, I get his point, but I don't fully agree. I feel like most of the public will only go to event movies in theaters. Myself, I catch a lot of indie films at home. Yeah, exactly. You know, and there are these filmmakers that get mad that you're watching a movie at home, but you know, it's Movies are movies. And a lot of us, and I think this is the truth, a lot of us who grew up, like in my generation, we discovered a lot of these movies at home. A lot of the classic films we discovered at home. I watched Citizen Kane on VHS at home. I watched Godfather at home. Scarface it was a classic film, but I love it. I watched a lot of 12 Angry Men. There are so many. Lawrence of Arabia. I watched a lot of these classic films for the first time at home, and they still worked on me. In fact, I would argue that classic films, if you watch them on TV for the first time, if they work for you, that speaks to how great the classic film is, that no matter what the venue is that you are watching it, you're still going to be impressed by it. So yeah. So I don't think you should denigrate watching indie films at home. I didn't like that he said that. I just did not like that. All right. One more from Haunted Autumn here. One more super chat. He said, on the subject of reviews, have you seen any of Flanagan's Fall of the House of Usher? Will you be covering it? Thanks again for the great stream. Yeah, I am planning on covering it because I like the trailer. Is it out on Netflix yet? I didn't think it was out already. I was on my Netflix today. I didn't see it come out. And I don't usually get Netflix stuff ahead of time. So, but I will absolutely make a point of watching that one when it does come out because it looks great. I saw the trailer. It looks, I think we talked about it on the Geek Buddies, the trailer. So yeah, I would absolutely watch it. There, Haunted Autumn, and I will probably do a review either with Mike or by myself, maybe with Shannon. I don't know. We shall see. All right, what else have we got here? Is that all the Streamlabs super chats? Okay, one last thing before I wrap up here because I should go. We've been on for an hour and 40 minutes, and we're starting to lose some people, so let's get it going. The trailers, 2 trailers. The Doctor Who trailer was fantastic. Have you guys watched the new one that dropped over the weekend? Really enjoyed that. I'm not the biggest Catherine Tate fan, so I didn't watch her episodes with Tennant, so I don't have the emotional backstory between them. I know that he had to erase her mind so that she wouldn't remember any of their adventures because there was some storyline there that if she did, she'd die. So they're somehow suspending that in this by having them both come back together as a way of launching in Kute Gatwe. And I will say this, I think it's curious that they're bringing back, 2 of their white Doctor Who, one of their white Doctor Who's, one of their white assistants to launch the Black Doctor Who, who's going to have, a diverse thing, but maybe they felt they needed to do that after some of the negative vibes around Jodie's Doctor Who. Although Jodie Whittaker was great as Doctor Who, the stories themselves really let her down overall. So, I'm interested to see what we're going to get. And maybe there's a video. I'm sure there's a video on YouTube that I can watch that'll give me the background, or maybe there's someone who wrote an article that'll list the episodes of Doctor Who that I need to watch to have the backup, because I'll take any excuse to watch Doctor Who episodes. I've become such a fan of Doctor Who that I got to watch. I mean, in fact, I was thinking about doing a Doctor Who podcast from a point of view of like discovering it for the first time. And Michael and Shannon were talking about it. So it could be fun to do like a special episode every week where we talk about one of the episodes and we go through the whole thing. But I feel the guys might lose a little interest because Doctor Who gets real wacky and some of the special effects budget isn't as strong for some of those episodes. So we'll see. But that'll be good. Mild Manor says, hey, Rocha, I will accept your apology if you review the Hedda the Gobbler trailer when it comes out. I read the book and love the story. I remember Hedda Gobbler. I read that in college. Hilarious, man. Hilarious. Oh, yeah, Monday Night Football is on, so some of you want to go watch that as well. The second thing is, wait, Shute Gatwa? Is that how you say his name? Shute Gatwa. Wow. If that's how you really say his name, why are there any consonants in his name? That is weird. Shuti Gatwa. Even though it's spelled in Kute Gatwe, I got to say it's Shuti Gatwa. Interesting. And one last trailer, which for some of you may know this or not, but I was teasing it earlier. The Onimusha trailer. I saw that just randomly on YouTube yesterday. I almost did a trailer reaction to it, but then I saw it had come out 2 days earlier, so I missed the boat on it. But this looks fantastic, and anime based on those video games that are set during the samurai periods of Japan, the feudal lord periods of Japan, with fantastical elements weaved through the games. They put this together and created an anime. And in the anime, the main character is essentially Toshiro Mifune. Someone else is voicing him because, of course, Toshiro Mifune has passed on. And he takes on this young girl whose parents have been killed by these otherworldly creatures, demons, and he's got to fight them off as he takes care of her. So it seems like a little bit of Balin and Shinhati, a little bit of Lone Wolf and Cub, but the anime itself is stellar. So even if it gets me 20 views, I am going to review that series and put a review out for it on the weekends. If it drops all at once, that'll be great. I'll watch them all at once and do a review. But the trailer looks phenomenal. Just the phenomenal visuals and the animation style and the way it evokes samurai movies while also evoking some of the horror stuff that's involved with this story. And then the song they used in the trailer was really interesting as well. So just going to recommend that to you all overall if you want to watch it. Well, it's only 10-3 at halftime, and they're saying the Eagles are getting, or the Buccaneers are getting killed. That's weird. All right. Rick Jones says, start Doctor Who with Tom Baker. Trust me. Oh, no, I've watched some Tom Baker ones. I have gone to watch them because I have Pluto TV, and Pluto TV has a Doctor Who channel. And by the way, Pluto TV is a free app. You can just free app, download it, put it on your Apple TV or on your Roku, and they have multiple channels of all these shows, and they play them back to back. Like there's a whole Jeopardy channel, so you can watch Jeopardy all day, or you could watch music videos from the 80s, 90s, 70s, and 60s all day, and 2000s and hip hop and country. They have all kinds of stuff there. They got an old sitcom channel, which is like Family Ties and Cheers, and all those 80s sitcoms back to back. And they have a Doctor Who channel where they play old Doctor Who back to back to back to back to back. So I will absolutely take a look at them, but they do have them on the Disney Plus app, right? I think some of the, and then I have the BritBox, which has some of the old Doctor Who stuff as well. But I do love Tom Baker, and I do occasionally catch him when I can. All right. I think that's it. Let's see if I have any more Streamlabs or Super Chats. No, that's it. All right, let's wrap it up. Thank you guys for hanging out with me tonight. I appreciate it madly. You guys are awesome. Thanks for the lively chat. So fun to see you all in here, and for the 250 of you who are joining me, I appreciate it very, very much. Please make sure you hit a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, would appreciate that as well. Leave your comments down below about everything I had to talk about in this streaming episode of The Nation. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your points of view, your opinions. Keep them respectful. Don't be a dick. Don't be condescending. There's a way to have a debate or conversation without having to revert to, oh, you're an idiot, or all that kind of stuff. You know, you don't need to do any of that. Be respectful. Don't with this whole that kind of nonsense. Just fucking tell you the truth. Be honest and respectful, and go from there. Yeah, and that's it. And thanks so much for hanging out with me. Follow me at the Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The Outlaw Nation on Twitch. Don't forget about my after Ahsoka reaction that I'll have tomorrow night after the new episode of Ahsoka. Don't forget our reviews coming up from the Geek Buddies and the Jedi Way this week. Kevin is back, feeling better, so you'll be joining us for the Jedi Way review as well. And the main Geek Buddies show that are be happening on Friday, and of course other stuff that I'll be dropping, trailer reactions, reviews, what have you. All of it here on the channel. You guys are awesome. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Be well, take care of yourselves, and remember what I say after every one of these shows. Whatever you need to do to get through the next second, next minute, next hour, next day, next week, next month, next year, make sure you do that. I love having you around. I love having you all to hang out and support me or battle me or uplift me or try to put me down. I don't care. All right? Just as long as you're here. You matter. You're important. You're fucking important. You matter. No matter what that voice inside your head is telling you, no matter what people are telling you in your family, friend circle, or your enemy circle, or at work, you matter. And keep doing the work to find out who you are. Keep doing the work to climb out of your trauma, climb out of your demons, to fight them. Keep doing the work and be good to yourself. It's hard. I know I'm hard on myself sometimes as well. It's hard to break those patterns of being hard on yourself because your dad was hard on you, or your mom was hard on you, or your elders were hard on you, or your church was hard on you, or your workers, your workmates are hard on you. Your boss was hard on you. You got to find a way to break that pattern. Treat yourself like you would treat your best friend. You wouldn't let your best friend talk to him or herself or themselves in a negative way. Why are you allowing yourself to do it? Why do you think you can handle it? You know, I was watching a video the other day, and I'm gonna wrap up with this because I'm gonna explore doing shadow work. And for those of you who don't know shadow work, you should take a look at that and see if it works for you. But I saw a video the other day. Professor of psychology was talking, very well-respected professor of psychology was talking about what's better, more positive thoughts or less negative thoughts? And he said less negative thoughts. So if you can find a way to say less negative things to yourself, you'll find that your life can change. You'll find that you'll find more positivity in the world. Look, I'm working through it too. I'm in the boat with you. We're all in the bucket, as I said earlier. We're all in the bowl. We're all in the bucket as human beings, battling our demons, battling our stuff, and battling our insecurities and our fears. But we all have to find our way to move forward. Even if it's a fucking baby toe, it's still moving forward, you know? And even if it's that day and you can't fully even put a baby toe out, but you're aware of it and you're trying to work towards finding your way out of these traumas and finding a better existence and better life, then I applaud you for that. And I want to encourage anybody who's maybe hesitant about doing that or scared of doing that or worried about doing that. There's a whole nother existence that's possible. Just got to do the work and make the effort, like anything in life, right? You make the effort to go to work every day so you can pay your bills and get a check and go out and buy food or go out with your significant other. Your mental health has to be the same thing, where you get up every morning like, okay, how am I going to work at this today? And even eliminate work. How am I going to endeavor to elevate this today or to move forward with my mental health today? How am I going to help myself today to move forward? These are the things you have to work on every day, because that demon may never stop talking to you. That little voice of yours may never stop talking to you. But the only thing you have to fear is fear itself, as the great Franklin Delano Roosevelt once said. And we can all get over fear. Just have to work through it. So just throwing that out there for you all to consume and think about as you go on through your days and through your life. I love you madly. Thanks so much for hanging out with me tonight. And I'll talk to you next time with another brand new episode of The Nation here on the Outlaw Nation channel. Peace until then.